From our Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana, Siddiqui. Our top story tonight. 3 years after the murder of George Floyd, a 46-year-old African-American man killed by a white police officer, the black community in the U.S. remains anxious about encounters with law enforcement. Images of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin pinning Floyd to the ground on May 25, 2020, reignited the Black Lives Matter movement. It sparked protests across the U.S. and the world, with millions demanding racial justice and an end to police brutality. Figures compiled by Turkey's Anadolu news agency show violence and discrimination against African Americans in the U.S. have not abated. The number of black people killed by American police officers has increased every year since Floyd's murder in 2020. Meanwhile, the conviction rate of police officers involved in such killings has remained exceptionally low. In over 98% of police-involved deaths reported between 2013 and 2022, not a single officer was punished. According to the last 10 years of data mapping police violence, black people are 3 times more likely to be killed by police than others. In related news, President Joe Biden marked the 3rd anniversary of George Floyd's murder by calling on Congress to pass meaningful police reforms and send it to him to sign. He said he will be willing to work with Republicans and Democrats and do everything in his power to fight for police accountability. Biden said the nation should honor the legacy and memory of George Floyd and of so many others like him. He recalled that Floyd's young daughter told him the day before her father's funeral that Daddy changed the world. He added Floyd's murder brought home to many what black and brown communities have long known and experienced. Biden said the injustice that has been brought to the world's attention has sparked one of the largest civil rights movements in generations. A new Texas law to take effect soon allows public schools to replace professional counselors with uncertified religious ministers. Governor Greg Abbott is expected to sign the bill passed by the Republican-controlled legislature on Wednesday. State House lawmakers approved the bill after their counterparts in the Senate passed it. The measure allows school districts to hire chaplains or accept them as volunteers to provide support, services, and programs to students. Activists say replacing school counselors with unlicensed chaplains amounts to forcing state-sponsored religion into public schools. Earlier last month, the state Senate approved another bill that would require teachers to post an edited version of the 10 Commandments in every classroom in Texas. The proposal was approved by Senate Republicans, but could not be acted on. The Department of Homeland Security has warned of an increased threat level in the run-up to the 2024 presidential election. In a Wednesday bulletin, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said his department expects the threat level to remain elevated. Other provocations could include legislative or judicial decisions related to societal issues. He said critical infrastructure, religious institutions, schools, racial and ethnic minorities, as well as government institutions could be targets of potential violence. Mayorkas said the threats come from violent extremists who want to enforce their ideological beliefs and personal grievances. Transgender military veteran Jessica Watkins, who stormed the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, was sentenced on Friday to 8.5 years in prison. She is a member of the far-right Oath Keepers and was convicted of participating in a conspiracy to disrupt the confirmation of the 2020 presidential election. U.S. District Judge of Columbia Amit Mehta said Watkins' efforts at the Capitol were aggressive. He said she showed no immediate remorse, even though she has since apologized. Watkins' sentencing came one day after Judge Mehta sentenced Oath Keepers founder Stuart Rhodes to 18 years in federal prison and Florida Oath Keeper Kelly Meggs to 12 years. According to prosecutors, Watkins founded and led a small militia in Ohio. She mobilized her group to Washington in coordination with the Oath Keepers on January 6th. Watkins and her fellow militiamen eventually marched to the Capitol in tactical gear and encouraged other rioters to push past police outside the Senate building. Watkins was acquitted of the serious charge of seditious conspiracy. However, she was convicted of conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. According to reports, Watkins gave an emotional testimony during the trial, detailing her struggle with sexual identity in the Army. Judge Mehta addressed Watkins' story, saying that her story itself showed a lot of courage and resilience. Native American leaders and more than 150 allied advocacy groups from across the U.S. are calling for the shutdown of a Canadian-owned oil and gas pipeline. In a letter to President Joe Biden, the groups asked him to revoke the president's permit for the ailing Canadian-owned Enbridge Line 5 pipeline. The groups fear it threatens an environmental disaster with oil spills into the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes contain 21% of the world's fresh surface water. The groups say more than 1 million gallons of fossil fuels have leaked from the pipeline in more than 30 incidents over the past 55 years. The letter said the ecology and food habits of Indigenous people in the region are in danger. They said an oil spill has the potential to permanently damage watershed ecology, wild rice, and fish populations. A landmark bill introduced in the New York State Assembly has given hope to Palestinians being forced off their land by Jewish settlers. The legislation, introduced last Wednesday by Zohran Mamdani, prohibits the use of tax-deductible donations to evict Palestinians from their land. The measure is supported by Jewish Voice of Peace, the Center for Constitutional Rights, the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights, and many others. Experts say this is the first New York State bill to actively support Palestinian freedom, and also the first of its kind in the United States. The legislation gives the New York Attorney General the power to sue groups that fund settlements and gives Palestinians harmed by settler organizations the ability to seek damages in U.S. courts. Anti-Palestinian lawmakers who oppose the bill call it anti-Semitic. In New York alone, Israel-friendly charities transfer at least $60 million each year to settler organizations that maintain the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Israeli settlers storm Al-Aqsa compound. Details after the break, so stay tuned and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Hundreds of Israeli settlers advanced Thursday to the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in occupied East Jerusalem. Turkey's Anadolu news agency reports the settlers marched into the mosque under heavy protection from Israeli forces to mark the Jewish Shavuot holiday. The Islamic Endowments Department in Jerusalem said over 250 Israeli settlers entered the courtyard of Al-Aqsa Mosque through its western wall. The department also said Israeli police have been restricting access for Palestinians since morning prayers. Earlier, Israeli groups had called on settlers to step up their storming of the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex to mark the holiday on Thursday and Friday. Israel has allowed settlers into the mosque almost every day since 2003. For Muslims, Al-Aqsa is the third holiest site in the world. Israel occupied East Jerusalem during the 1967 Israeli-Arab War, annexing the entire city in 1980. The move has never been recognized by the international community. A mosque in Germany has received a threatening letter with Nazi symbols. Authorities said the mosque in Göttingen received the letter on Thursday with the Nazi swastika and other neo-Nazi signs. Mehmet Ibrahimbas, chairman of the Mosque Association, said the letter contained racist and Islamophobic phrases. He said the mosque community and Muslims in the city were concerned because of ongoing threats of violence. It is the second threatening letter the mosque has received within a few months. As well, last September, unknown persons painted a swastika on the wall of the house of worship. Last year, 62 mosques were attacked in Germany, and at least 39 people were injured by anti-Muslim violence. Germany has the second largest Muslim population in Western Europe after France. Poverty and desperation are forcing several Syrians to abandon their babies outside mosques, hospitals, and even under olive trees. Washington-based Syrians for Truth and Justice reports more than 100 children were abandoned nationwide between early 2021 and late 2022. The group said the actual number could be much higher. The war in Syria has killed more than 500,000 people, displaced millions, and devastated the country's infrastructure. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad issued a decree this year to create special facilities for the children. A German think tank has found sanctions imposed by the UN and the US have hit poorer populations in targeted countries. A study published by Munich-based IFO Institute shows countries covered by UN sanctions have experienced a 2% annual decline in growth. This represents a 25% decline in per capita economic output over the past 10 years. Florian Neumayer, head of IFO's Fiscal and Financial Policy Research Group, said economic sanctions primarily affect the poor in these countries. He said sanctions imposed on Iran in 2012 mainly hit the young and uneducated population. The think tank based its study on an evaluation of 160 countries. The study's authors found economic sanctions in poor countries also led to lower life expectancy. The data also showed women were more affected by sanctions than men. The U.S. House Select Committee on China has called on Congress to block online sales of clothing made by Uyghur slaves living in China's Xinjiang Autonomous Region, also known as East Turkestan. In a report released Wednesday, the panel urged Congress to pass legislation that would fund documentation of China's genocide of Uyghurs. It also seeks to require the executive branch to undertake diplomatic efforts to help those fleeing the Xinjiang region and seeking refuge. The report was prepared following a March 23rd hearing on the Uyghur genocide by the bipartisan special committee established earlier this year. The law on the prevention of Uyghur forced labor, passed in 2021, prohibits the import of goods produced by forced labor. Officials say more than $1 billion worth of supplies already have been prevented from entering the United States. However, $800 worth of goods are exempt from customs inspection. Online retailers use the loophole to sell items to customers piecemeal. The value of goods entering the U.S. market under this exemption has increased from less than $10 billion in 2020 to nearly $40 billion in 2021. The House panel has called on Congress to close this loophole. The report also calls on Congress to provide more funding to the Department of Homeland Security to consistently enforce the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. It also calls for a comprehensive list of all companies involved in forced labor. China has launched a digital inquiry system to help citizens find out information about registered religious leaders. The online system for Islamic, Catholic, and Christian clergy was launched Tuesday. According to the state-run Global Times newspaper, the move was aimed to promote openness of religious affairs and the identification and management of clergy. The newspaper reports the management of clerical personnel will combat fraud and discourage false religious personnel. A similar information retrieval system has already been introduced for Buddhist and Taoist clergy. People must now log on to the websites of the Chinese Islamic Association, the Catholic Church of China, the China Christian Council, and the State Bureau of Religious Affairs to check on registered clergy. They can be found either by entering the name on the ID card, the religious title, or by entering a specific city. The newspaper reported in recent years there have been repeated cases of fraud involving fake religious leaders. Such incidents have seriously damaged the image of religious groups and disrupted social and political order, it said. The 57-member Organization of Islamic Cooperation has decided to assist member countries in economic recovery and development. OIC Secretary General Hussein Brahim Taha said ministerial-level meetings will be held to support agriculture, food security, and employment-generating sectors. He said the group will hold many meetings to achieve this goal. Taha spoke at the 39th meeting of the OIC Standing Committee on Economic and Trade Cooperation, held in the Turkish capital Ankara. He said the COVID-19 pandemic caused an unprecedented decline in economic activities at the global level. Once the pandemic was under control, the Ukraine-Russia war and subsequent sanctions further weakened the global economy. Food supplies to many OIC member countries were disrupted as a result. The World Bank estimates the crisis will result in an additional 75 to 95 million people living in extreme poverty. Taha urged member countries to participate in the 18th OIC Trade Fair in Lahore, Pakistan next month, as well as a tourism fair in Doha, Qatar in November. Before we end today's news, I'd like to make a special request. It takes our team a combined 55 hours of work daily to produce this news for you. It is news with a unique perspective, and you will find it only here. Sound Vision is a not-for-profit organization which produces it, and just like PBS and NPR, it depends on your donations. Please visit muslimnetwork.tv to donate now, or click on the link below to donate. Thank you. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.